Tesla just released these insane demonstration videos with their Tesla robots and are making some pretty wild claims about the phase they've reached in the Tesla Optimus robot development, insofar as the way that they can instruct these robots and train these robots to perform new tasks. They had these videos of the robots cooking, doing vacuuming, doing all these different like household chores, and they said that this was all being trained from videos created by humans wearing GoPros. Like it's not being done with haptic touch feedback suits, which makes this incredibly scalable, as you can imagine. And it gets to a thought that I have, because I see the two biggest places where Tesla robots will scale up first. Obviously, one is going to be factories, right? Factory environments are very predictable, very regulated, very controlled. It's going to be very easy or relatively speaking, easier for a Tesla bot to be put to use in a factory performing dangerous, boring, repetitive jobs. But the next space after the factory that I think not enough people are talking about is agriculture. Outside in agricultural settings, where there's a big shortage of agricultural labor for a whole host of reasons. We've got like immigration stuff, and it's also just ag jobs are really difficult and punishing. It's a lot of like piecemeal work, going out and picking cherries, man. Picking cherries is like hard. Picking strawberries is really, really hard. And there's not as much migrant labor and cheap labor that's been available. And it's understandable that less people would want to do those jobs. But it is also a place where, it's a more challenging environment than a factory, because it's not as predictable, not as standardized. But it's also a work environment that doesn't have too much interaction with the general public. Like, I think a lot of people who are really bullish about robots in homes or in service jobs, like that's going to be years down the line, because there's a lot more potential liability once the robots are interacting with ordinary humans. And there's a potential of like, the robot falling down on a child or an elder or whatever else. And also I think there will be a weird uncanny valley effect amongst the ordinary users interacting with these robots. So when I think of the jobs that these Tesla bots will do, you kind of prioritize it in terms of like controlled environments, repetitive, boring, dangerous work that people don't want to do, and environments where the robots are not interacting with the general public and for lack of a better sense, kind of weirding people out. But this gets into the topic of this video, interest point of mine, something I've been very interested in for like a decade or more, permaculture, and how Tesla robots are going to enable the scaling of permaculture at scale. And permaculture, for those who don't know, it's a collection of farming, land management, and processes, techniques that different thinkers in sustainable agriculture have aggregated from indigenous communities around the world. Like, a lot of the permaculture techniques are really just kind of like going out, finding, repackaging, or integrating, ingenious land management, resource management solutions that indigenous peoples, native peoples all over the world who have had to perfect living in their environments for thousands of years have developed. We're talking about like retexturing, recontouring land masses so that they absorb as much rainwater as possible through swales and contours, mixed diverse polycultures, all these other things. And in many ways, like the way that we think of development, technological progress in our Western minds and in capitalism, a lot of the techniques in permaculture are sort of regressive in that context. Like they go backwards against things like labor efficiency, but they gain a lot in terms of resource and input efficiency. Like the original sin of agricultural systems and agriculture generally is monoculture. Because when you go to monoculture, where you're only growing one crop, you get into efficiencies, economies of scale. You can develop specialized tools, and you look at a lot of the 19th and then 20th century technologies, specifically around how we scaled up and industrialized agriculture. It's because developing the tools, the machines, you know, the combine, the reaper, the thresher, a lot of these different harvesting and planting tools, the seed planting drill. These are all things that are optimized around monoculture, cultivating only one crop in one field, so that you can mechanize a much of the labor with doing that and make it hyper scalable, so that you can have one dude on a tractor and a combine, you know, growing like 10,000 acres of wheat, 10,000 acres of corn, 10,000 acres of soy, harvesting it all, right? If you're doing a diverse polyculture, that's not possible. Like diverse polyculture is only possible with gardeners basically working by hand. But then the contrast between those two that you end up getting is that when you have a monoculture, nature, ecology abhors a monoculture. If you have 10,000 acres of wheat, then you've got a smorgasbord, a feeding frenzy, a buffet for all of the different pests, diseases, you know, like rust, grasshoppers, whatever, that love eating wheat, because wheat, you know, we cultivated wheat to make a really fat seed and germ endosperm for us to eat, right? But then on the other side, if you do a diverse polyculture, which is what permaculture systems have, they have these things called guilds, right? Guilds where you figure out the synergistic planting of like 10, 15 different useful plants. It could be you have a canopy layer, a sub-canopy layer, a sub-shrub layer, then a ground cover layer. You got like different climbing plants, and you could have like an apple tree, lavender bushes, basil, sweet potatoes. You know, you could have a diverse garden that's growing a whole bunch of different things. And as far as the utilization of space, like how many different crops and how much different calories, sources of nutrition you get out of the space, it's far more efficient, like way more efficient. And as far as your utilization of resources, whether that's the input of sunlight, right? You have so many different shaped leaves, and each different shape of leaf, each different type of plant in there is harvesting sunlight in a different way, as opposed to a monoculture of just wheat or just soy or just citrus, right? And you're also utilizing the nutrients that are in the ground in different ways. You can have nitrogen fixing plants that are a significant part of your system, so that you get a little bit of self-maintenance in terms of nutrients coming into the system, rather than you having to manually put those nutrients in with fertilizers. And you also mix things up so that no one single pest can grow out of control, because having this diverse polyculture, you've got a lot more spaces for habitat for your beneficial insects, for your predatory insects, etc., etc., etc. So long story short, monoculture is the original sin of agriculture. All of the negative externalities associated with agriculture, with industrialized agriculture, large-scale agriculture as we know it, is downstream of the fact that our agricultural production system is a monoculture. You have to put in fertilizer, you have to put in pesticides, you have to do different kinds of intensive management practices in order to make up for the fact that growing, 1,000 acres, 100 acres of all the same thing is inherently brittle and goes against like the natural laws of ecology. But then on the flip side, if you have a diverse polyculture, you avoid all of those problems, you greatly reduce the number of inputs, but then you have a far more complicated, complex system that requires a lot more know-how to manage and is not possible to manage with mechanization, like the mechanization tools we developed in the 1800s, 1900s, 20th century. You know, like if you've got a food forest, right, that has like 5 different types of fruiting trees as your canopy layer, like it could be citrus, cherimoya, avocado, ice cream bean, right? And then you've also got like sweet potatoes growing as your ground cover, and you've got like climbing beans, runner beans in there as your and you've got like different shrubs and stuff. Like, how do you mechanize harvesting that? It's not possible. The only way for you to maintain that is if you've got a whole bunch of hippies who really love gardening and are really into living synergistically with the earth, that want to manage it by hand. And that's basically what the permaculture movement is. And I like worked in those spaces, like lived in those spaces, and it's really awesome, but it's not scalable, and it's only going to change small pockets of the world where it gets into place. Enter Tesla Optimus robot. Tesla Optimus robot can, you know, if you can train a Tesla Optimus robot to manage a diverse polyculture, and you can manufacture millions and millions of them, why wouldn't we go to all of our food production systems just being food forests managed by Optimus robots? Now you no longer have pest problems, you no longer have disease problems, you no longer need to put in fertilizers, or you massively reduce the amount of fertilizer you have to use, because you can have like a lot of nitrogen fixing and dynamic nutrient accumulating plants mixed in to your food forest. You no longer need like pesticides and herbicides. Your weed management gets a lot better. Your soil degradation goes away once you go to perennial polyculture systems. And then you get into this interesting space of, there are incredibly productive, like unbelievably productive plants that have never even been fully commercialized as crops, because it's not really possible to mechanize them with existing technology. It's not possible to mechanize them and scale their production until you have something like a Tesla Optimus robot. The example of that being the breadfruit tree. So I had a colleague that I knew who had this nonprofit called Global Breadfruit. Breadfruit is a tropical fruit tree. I mean, its productive asset is its fruits, but the way we think culinarily of fruits, it's not a fruit, it's really a vegetable. The breadfruit is, you know, lack of a better comparison, it's basically a potato. So this is a tropical tree from Polynesia. It's one of the main staples of the Polynesian cultures in the Polynesian Triangle in Hawaii and you know, those other spots in Polynesia that they brought with them in their canoes. And it's incredibly productive. Like, one breadfruit tree growing in the tropics produces enough calories to feed a family of 4, which is insane, right? Like, that's insane to think about how productive that is, yet it's never been truly commercialized, because if the crop that it produces is basically potatoes and it's a fruit tree, then the only way you can manage it is by hand. You're gonna need people to prune it, you're gonna need people to pick it. And labor costs for picking something that is as valuable per unit as avocados is already like pinches avocado growers. So you got an avocado that's like $1 a piece retail, and you have to pick those. How the hell are you going to make money on a potato that you have to pick? Like, given how cheap potatoes are, like it's a staple carb starchy thing. So outside of like really small niche products in like isolated tropical island economies, like breadfruit has not been able to take off. But once you have Optimus robots, if you have Optimus robots that can go and pick all these breadfruits, like, holy crap. Not to mention that that it's a really productive, scalable staple crop for the tropics. And thus far, because like scalable agricultural systems first developed in temperate regions, like a lot of countries in the tropics end up importing food, even though their potential for food production is so much higher, because the climatic conditions in the tropics, as far as like how much sunlight you get, how much rain you get, humidity is higher. But then there's disease pressures, and the breadfruit is probably an example that can be applied to a dozen or more other plants from the tropics. Plants that are incredibly productive, incredibly efficient, have tremendous potential for feeding people, for producing great things, or great products and great crops, but they've never been commercialized because the labor component. Like you can't, there is no combine thresher for picking breadfruit until we get the Optimus robot. And this is something that the Optimus robot is going to change, that I think not enough people are talking about and thinking about. Like, you know, we could go to having like food forests, urban food forest, permaculture gardens in every major city center. It could be like what lines our streets. You know, I'm just imagining like all of these landscapes here, right, that we see around this Walmart in front of us. That could all be food forest instead of it being landscape tree. The reason it's not food forest now is because the labor component of managing that, if it was a food forest, in terms of pruning it, picking it, thinning the fruits, making sure that you harvest the fruits in a timely fashion so that they don't become a nuisance. Because, you know, when you have like productive fruit trees that aren't actively managed, so a lot of the fruits end up rotting on them or falling down, it becomes a tremendous nuisance because it attracts all kinds of pests, rats, you'll have like birds and parrots or whatever, you know, all these other things. But if you have Optimus robots that manage that landscape, so that can intelligently manage it, why the hell wouldn't you have every single one of these landscape trees be a fucking avocado or a citrus, or you know, if you go a little bit further south down to like LA, San Diego, you could probably do mangoes. Like there's no reason why everything couldn't be an edible landscape once you have the access to that kind of intelligent, scalable humanoid labor and artificial labor. And that's going to be incredibly exciting. It's going to be super cool to see. I would love to see it happen, and who knows, maybe even contribute to it. But those are my thoughts. That's all the time that I want to share with you. West Coast.